And thank you so much for being here. This is the Go Show, celebrating all things outdoors in this beautiful outdoor playground of a world that we live in. You can always find us on all the social media sites, including the one you're streaming on right now, as we stream every single day live at 11 a.m. So I appreciate you being here. Really do. Yeah. And the podcast available wherever you get your podcast. Apple, we're having a problem with. It's okay. We're going to get that fixed. No big deal. Apple Music will be up soon enough, or Apple Podcast, whatever it's called. So we're going to be just fine being up there in just moments. But Spotify, Google, YouTube, you got it. We are here and streaming live. So let's do this. This is very interesting. There's a couple of things that we're going to have to cover with the NRA today. And I'm going to cover my opinion of the NRA later. Don't worry about it. We'll get to that. And I'm sure everybody said, Wayne LaPierre, torches and pitchforks. Just settle down. We need to talk about this. The reason why I bring up the NRA today is because they're in front of the Supreme Court yesterday. This is a very big deal. This is a very, very big case. And wait till you hear who is representing the NRA. Strange bedfellows, I tell you. It's very, very interesting. But I want to back up because I think this is an important topic to discuss. It's an important conversation for all of us to have. And the reason why it's important, the reason why at least I think it's important, is that shooting sports are a big part of our outdoor world. So this is a show about the outdoors. We can't just don't talk about guns. No, we have honest conversations and we talk like grown-ups here. We rarely, and I mean rarely bring up politics in this show. This is not a political show, but we are going to have to talk about the certain legislation. We'll have to talk about the State of the Union, which we'll talk about today. We're going to just kind of jump back and talk about that because the NRA was mentioned a couple of times in the State of the Union. So we're going to jump on that and talk about that as well. Okay. So that's where we're going to go. And so let's jump right in this here. I am a firm believer, and I think I'm right in saying this. I'm a firm believer that the vast majority of gun owners in this world, responsible firearm owners in this world, want to see an end to gun violence. We don't want gun violence. No one does. No one wants mass shootings. No one wants a kid to get shot. No one wants any of this noise. No one. So if we move along with just that premise alone, and that we want to do something as well, but something that doesn't infringe upon our Second Amendment rights, here we go. That's where we need to go. The screaming and the hollering and the torches and pitchforks and all that just needs to go away. It needs to stop. And real solutions need to be brought forward. So I'm going to go back to the State of the Union. State of the Union was the standard speech. It was the standard play, and it was anti-everything gun. It was, let's see, was it Bam Call? Demanding that they ban assault weapons. Let's pause there. No such thing as an assault weapon. There's a firearm, and the firearm is just a firearm. I have several of them. They're all firearms because they have not been used in any type of assault. So it is essentially just a firearm. I have firearms. My firearms are my safe. My firearms, it takes me, a very unstable person, to actually use my firearms for assault. So there's no such thing as an assault weapon. But what they are speaking of when they say assault weapon is AR-15s, AKs, the scary looking firearms, the long guns, the modern sporting rifle, which is the most popular firearms in the world. Call for an immediate ban on those. Okay. What else did you call for an immediate ban on? High capacity magazines. And God bless them for at least getting the word magazine correct, at least the speechwriters. Magazines correct and not calling it a clip. High capacity magazines. That means any magazine can hold over 10 rounds. That's usually where they go. They think if it can only hold 10 rounds, then that firearm will not be used for nefarious purposes. But if it has 11 in it, I tell you, so there's a high capacity assault magazines apparently calling for a ban. And then the call for a universal background checks. Let's pause there as well. Universal background checks, by a show of hands, who knows what a universal background check is? Who knows what is entailed in a universal background check? What do they mean when they say universal background checks? I think if you line up 10 people in front of you, you're going to get 10 different versions and 10 different answers on what universal background check means. And it is important to note that when if somebody says, yes, universal background checks are a good idea, the follow-up question is good. What does that mean? And good, who's going to write the legislation? We need to focus on mental health. Okay. Who's going to decide what mental health is? Who's going to decide what healthy is? Who's going to decide what unhealthy is? Politicians. Right. So you already know with Congress sitting at about a 13% approval rating, you're going to trust them with any of these decisions on defining what a universal background check is, right? In defining what concealed carry should be and shouldn't be, universal carry. You can trust them in these decisions. What mental health is, I'm not trusting them. I'm trusting them at all. So that's a big, I demand that this happens. And I took on the NRA. That's what he said. That's why we're talking about the State of the Union. I know it was back a month ago, but I want to talk about it because NRA is back in the news with the Supreme Court case. So the NRA, this is wild to me, was brought up as I beat the NRA and passed the most comprehensive firearm legislation in some 4 decades or something like that. He set up an Office of Gun Violence Prevention in the White House. Isn't that cute? I don't care who it is. Republicans, I don't care if it's some corporation. I don't care what it is. Democrats, I don't care. Setting up an Office of Gun Violence Prevention in any capacity is not, you're not even dealing with an issue. You're doing stuff for the sake of doing stuff. And that's quite literally it. One of the things in there that I don't know if you caught, I rewound it this morning thrice. So 3 times I went back and saw the president talking about his time, talking about taking on the NRA. When he was announcing the bans on what he called assault weapons, high capacity magazines, and demanding universal background checks, he claims, I'm not kidding. I had to rewind it because I thought, okay, this is a deep fake. I'm going to go in. I actually went to the actual site of the State of the Union from the White House, their YouTube channel, and went to that part, and I isolated it. And he did say that he taught the Second Amendment for 12 years. This is what we're up against, folks. Quite literally, this is what we're up against. The man is the leader of the free world, and he has an administration, does not like firearms, doesn't like your ability to carry firearms, and claims he has taught the Second Amendment for 12 years. He didn't teach anything for 12 years. As a matter of fact, he was what was it called? Professor of practice at the University of Pennsylvania. Professor of practice. That means forum discussions and public appearances. He never taught a class. And he did that, by the way, for just 2 years. Taught the Second Amendment for 12 years. No, you didn't. And why does the Second Amendment need 12? Second Amendment doesn't even need 12 minutes of teaching. It's very clear. Quite literally very clear. But here's the deal. With all of these things and these calls for a ban on this and a ban on that, it's barking up the wrong tree. It's doing nothing. You see, if you wanted to really, if this were about gun violence prevention and you wanted to take on outdoorsmen, shooting sports enthusiasts like us and punish us for something that we didn't do, we didn't have a part of, nor will we ever do or have a part of. If it were truly about preventing gun violence in this nation, you'd ban handguns. That's it. And if you want to just ban violence altogether, you're going to go after clubs, knives, bats. That's what you're going to have to take on, because these modern sporting rifles are, I think, make up less than 1% of gun deaths in this nation. Less than 1%. That's a big deal. Less than 1%. Knowing that fact alone would make you scratch your head and go, why do they want to ban ARs? Why? That doesn't make sense. It's not supposed to make sense. And it's not about gun violence prevention. It's literally about control and getting the win and saying you did something. It's exactly what it is. It's the DC way. So before we talk about the NRA in the Supreme Court, Before we talk about that, I want to talk about the NRA, my stance. And this is just my show. These are my opinions. I'm not saying this fact you shouldn't. I'm telling you. Why, Mike, are you a lifetime member of the National Rifle Association? There's several reasons why. I'm going to get my buddy Travis, who works for the NRA. I would like to have him on this program. I'm going to meet up with him this weekend. Hopefully we can book something for next week, because I want to know what's going on. What's the current state of the NRA? I'd love to know. But the best explanation I have ever received from joining the NRA came from my good friend Tim Forshee. If you're here locally and you're looking for a concealed carry course, he's at Scottsdale Gun Club. He's the best. He's one of the most brilliant men I've ever known, and he's an attorney, and he's trust me, he's the one you want to know. He's a volunteer sheriff. The guy's the real deal. But he said he was talking to a room of people, and he said, "How many?" So I'll ask you, how many of you are registered Republican? How many of you are registered Democrats? How many of you are registered independents? Okay. Now, how many of you voted for this person? How many of you voted for that person? Let me ask you this. Now that you've done that, you've actually committed to that group, whether you're Republican, Democrat, you committed to the group, whether you voted for somebody, you voted for that person, you committed to that person. Do you agree with everything that person says? Do you agree with everything that person does? Do you agree with everything they legislate or their past voting record? No. Do you agree with everything the Republican Party does? No. Do you agree with everything the Democrat Party does? No. Do you agree with every independent candidate that you see? I mean, I think there's two currently, and that's Kyrsten Sinema and Bernie Sanders. Do you agree with them? Everything they do? No, but you're an independent. Why would you say you're an independent? Join the NRA. I know you don't agree with everything the NRA does, and the Wayne LaPierre days are gone. And by the way, there was a lot of good things that Wayne LaPierre that happened under Wayne LaPierre's leadership. So we'll talk about that as well in a bit. But the NRA quite literally is the only thing standing between you and Washington, D.C. when it comes to trying to take your Second Amendment away, period. There's smaller groups out there. They're powerful as well, but when it comes down to it, it's the NRA. It really is. And I know I'm probably ruffling some feathers here, but hey, support this organization that is the last line of defense for somebody coming knocking on your door and saying, you have 3 ARs that you've purchased in the last 7 years. We'd like those, please. They're the defense against that. Mike, that would never happen. Like, come on, Mike. Mike, come on. That would never happen. Okay. Let's get to the Supreme Court case. The Supreme Court is, and again, this is not a political show. We are talking about your right to bear arms. We're talking about your involvement in the shooting sports, the outdoor world, and hunting. That's what we're talking about. This is very important, huge. And what's going on right now with the Supreme Court and the NRA is huge. So much so. I can't wait to read this to you. I'm so excited to read this to you. You're going to be blown away by the organization that's representing the National Rifle Association. I hope you're ready for this. The ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, and rightfully so. Isn't this mind-blowing? The ACLU, and there had to have been an entire maybe even a listening session after this was announced. Okay, all the ACLU offices, like, okay, I want everyone to understand, you know how we feel. We know how you feel. We're going to represent the NRA. We have to. The ACLU, their biggest push, and yes, a bunch of stuff that, again, we're not political here, a bunch of stuff that at least I can say very openly I don't agree with. But one thing they will defend, and they will defend ardently, it doesn't matter what it is. They will defend the Constitution. They will defend primarily the First Amendment. The right of free speech is huge to the ACLU. That's the one, that's their pillar. That's the one, that's their foundation. That's the one they stand on. So there's a case brought to the Supreme Court by the ACLU going after the state of New York and saying they violated the First Amendment rights of the National Rifle Association. And this is fantastic. because obviously I don't have to, I don't have to really tell you, but you do understand this, that the ACLU hates them some guns. The ACLU hates them most everything conservative thought. The ACLU hates them any hunting sports and all of that. Hunting, shooting, they're just not a fan. So I'm actually on the ACLU website right now. And the headline is, why is the ACLU representing the NRA before the United States Supreme Court? Because, ready for this? I agree with them on this. The ACLU has always stood for free speech, no matter the speaker. So I'm going to read it because it's actually pretty funny. The defense and protection of free speech and I'm going to put my glasses on and expression span many forms of issues at the ACLU. In this last year alone, it has included efforts to actively oppose book bans, represent educators fighting classroom censorship aimed at suppressing important race. They want to make sure in the very first paragraph of this answer to why they're representing the NRA. Look at all the other things we did. No. We did a lot of other things. While the faces of the free speech movement continue to change, the significance of defending free speech remains unchanged. This work lies at the heart of the ACLU's core principles and values. Yesterday, Supreme Court and ACLU argued before the Supreme Court in another free speech case of significance. In this case, the ACLU represented the NRA against government overreach and censorship. Some may have wondered why the ACLU was representing the NRA, since the ACLU clearly opposes the NRA on gun control and the role of firearms in society. Again, strange bedfellows, right? The NRA is on the side of the Constitution, period. The ACLU, when they say things like the role of firearms in society, very anti-Second Amendment. In fact, this is from the ACLU website. In fact, we hate essentially many of the group's goals, strategies, and tactics. So the reality that we have joined forces, notwithstanding those disagreements, reflects the importance of the First Amendment principles at stake in this case. I applaud the ACLU for doing what's right here. I really do. And I think that it's a testament to their values, whether you believe in what they believe in or not. It is a huge, it's a huge thing. This is big. Here's what the case is about. This is what the NRA case is about. And it's interesting to me that it even had to get this far. But when you hear things, or when you hear, at least when I hear, come on, they're not gonna do anything like that. They're not gonna come take your guns. They're not gonna have you register your firearms. They're not gonna chisel away at the Second Amendment. Yeah, they are. And they're playing a long game. So I want to explain to you what is at stake here. All right. Because there's two First Amendment cases going on in front of the Supreme Court right now, and they're both gigantic. This one is the NRA versus VULO, or National Rifle Association versus VULO. And this is, I'm reading from a website called Vox. Vox hates everything conservative, everything hunting, everything fishing, everything firearms. They cannot stand it, but they have to. Actually, this article is titled, "The NRA has a case before the Supreme Court that it absolutely should win." Yes. All right. Here's what's that case. The NRA and New York's top financial regulator brought a legitimate enforcement action against 3 insurance companies that did business with the NRA. And these companies agreed to pay a $13 million fine. But then, while completely benign enforcement action was underway, the same regulator issued guidance to all insurers who do business in the state, warning them to continue evaluating and managing their risks, including reputational risks that may arise from their dealings with the NRA or similar gun promotion organizations. Yeah, the official state regulator, the government, giving these regulators' guidance, including reputational risks, is a clear violation of the First Amendment. Period. The government can't do that. The government cannot threaten institutions that do business with a certain group. They can't. The government can't really communicate as it's doing here with private companies. So, in another case, by the way, this is Supreme Court too, was Murphy versus Missouri. That's can the government force or coerce or threaten social media companies to ban certain people or certain posts? No. A million times, no. That is a clear violation of the First Amendment. But and there's a reason, and I'm telling you, there's a real reason why I bring this up. Again, shooting sports are huge in our world. Hunting with firearms, huge in our world. So we can't sit around and think the government won't do this. Do you remember Operation Choke Point? Operation Choke Point was an administration rule essentially to banks, a threat to banks, a strong arming to banks. I think what was the line? Boots on the necks. Yes, of these. That's why choke point, right? So of financial institutions to not encouraging them or threatening them to not do business with firearm and ammunition manufacturers and the retailers that sold it. Again, a flagrant violation of the Constitution of the United States of America. Wait, what? No. And that would be just like the government saying, hey, that Go Show with Mike Russell. He's talking about the NRA today. He's speaking to the NRA, and I don't know. He might have been inciting violence because he talked about firearms. He talked about how his firearms never escaped from the safe and went and shot anybody. I think he said shot anybody. I think that means he's a call to violence. I think you need to take his show down in the YouTube and Facebook and Twitter. Say, okay. And they take it down. It's a flagrant violation of the First Amendment of the United States of America. That's why the ACLU is representing the NRA. I'm encouraged, actually, because if you've known me for the past 11 years on the show, I've been let's just talk like grownups, especially this. We'll get to this in a minute with the auction tags. Again, there's just been a bunch of mudslinging and anger, and I have been called to bring some peace. Just talk like a grown-up, okay? So if the ACLU hates the NRA, NRA hates the ACLU, and there was such a government overreach, such a flagrant violation of the Constitution, the both of them teamed up before the Supreme Court, that alone should encourage you. That should be encouraging that, hey, we might get this right. We might get this right. And that's going back to, and if you want to give money to the ACLU, give money to the ACLU. If you want to join the NRA, join the NRA. But that goes to show you as well that sides can get along that are outside of politics. They can get along. And I think we should. Can't we all just get along? All about it. And it also shows that the NRA truly is under fire by elected officials. And once they under fire was pun not intended by elected officials trying to run them out of business. So there's no defense, but I mean, there's no shield between our Second Amendment and you. There's no, and the government taking it away. There's no shield. The NRA is that shield. So do with your money what you do with your money. But I am a member of the NRA. No, oh, but they did this and they did that again. Okay, I mean, I love my kids unconditionally. I don't like a lot of stuff they do. I'm gonna stop being their dad. Yeah, I'm all in. Yeah, signed up for that. So I'll keep you posted on what's going on with this. Usually it's around June that the Supremes come out with their ruling. So we'll definitely keep an eye on this, and it's very important. It is very, very important case. So we're gonna check this out. And by the way, when it does go toward, I mean, I I wouldn't be surprised if it is a solid majority win in this case. And when it does come out, it's a giant flex on elected officials. Don't try to jack with our Second Amendment. Just don't. Don't. You keep trying. You're going to keep on trying, and we're going to keep squashing you, because that's the beauty of the checks and balances that we have. Hey, thanks for hanging out. This is the Go Show, celebrating all things outdoors in this beautiful outdoor playground of a world that we live in. That's why we talk about firearms. Firearms are a big part of our outdoor world. So in the shooting, sports, and hunting. So that's why we do it. I did mention the auction tax. I want to come back to that. And for those of you who don't know, the Arizona Game and Fish Commission has voted to eliminate in the future their commission tags, their special tags. Eliminate the ability for the receivers of these tags to auction them off. And that has caused a big, giant kerfuffle, and rightfully so. And again, I'm going to be very clear. I actually talked to the commissioner last night and again reiterated, I am not I'm not a fan of that decision at all. So, but we are here we are, and we have to figure things out. I talked to a good friend of mine, and he runs one of the biggest wildlife conservation organizations in the state. It's the big one. And he said that, there's some people that are pretty wrangled up. They're pretty riled up about you when you interviewed Commissioner Guggenauer, who brought forth the motion to eliminate auction tax. That kind of took me back a little bit. A couple of things that I want to say, just as me. This is just Mike Russell speaking, and I really hope that you can give me a minute in this. It took me back, first of all, because I have, for 11 years on this program right here, for 11 years, I have stood right by and behind and promoted and advertised and gave a voice to a lot of these critter groups. And this is all gratis. Just because I believe in conservation. I believe in these organizations. They're doing the right thing. They're doing everything. They're doing on the ground stuff that Game and Fish just doesn't have the capacity to do. And I love them for it. And I've stood by them for over a decade. So to think that I am not on their side in any capacity is disheartening, and it's wrong, because I am 100% on the critter group side. There's no two ways about it. I am. And that's what you know of me, and that's why it was disheartening. Yeah, okay. But also the interview with Commissioner Guggenauer, and I encourage you to go back and check out the podcast. I thought it was a good discussion between two people that don't agree with this subject. I gave him a lot of credit for being a man that stands on principles. And I will, if this is your principle and you're going to stand in opposition, in front of opposition, and make that move, I respect you for that. And that's just man to man. Some of the feedback I got was I was too nice. Well, I respect Jim Guggenauer, Commissioner Guggenauer. I know him. I work with him. And I respect his background. I respect what he does currently. I respect his wanting to volunteer for another 5 years on the commission. Those are the type of people you want. They want to volunteer. And my business model here at the Go Show is not to rub people's face in the mud, period. Just what it is. I know I did I talked about the State of the Union, and I took it to the president a little bit, but I mean, it's about the extent of it. It's not my model. So I wanted to state definitively right here in this show that I am 100% behind the critter groups, the WCOs, the wildlife conservation organizations. I'm 100% behind them. I stand with them in opposition of what the commission did, but it's now time to move on and find a solution. What's done is done. We are where we are. It's time to move forward and find a solution. And if I'm judged for that, fantastic, because I'm just going to talk like a grown-up and do exactly what I would encourage my kids to do. Y'all work it out. Y'all work it out. Everything's going to be fine. We're going to get through this. We're going to get past it. Everything's going to be good, and we're gonna survive this. And I think it's a good thing that we can talk like grown-ups, and we hopefully can find a way to recoup those funds that were brought to us by big super rich people. Yeah. But that's my stance on it. I stand by you. And by the way, I'll continue my stance. Excuse me. I support the commission in what it does. I don't agree with this commission, the commission's ruling on auction tax. I don't agree with that, but I still 100% support and am always behind the commission in their efforts to make some very difficult decisions, whether we like them or not. So that's where I'm standing. That's not a flip-flop teeter-totter. That's not walking a fence. That's just me being me. I support everyone who is on the ground in conservation in the WCOs, and I also support the Game and Fish Department and the commission. So we're all one big team. We're all doing the same thing. We're all wearing the same jersey, folks. This is a jersey of conservation because we are the front line of conservation. I don't want you to understand as well. If you don't know what the Pittman-Robertson model is, the North American model of wildlife conservation and how they work together, one is the tenant of conservation in this nation. The other funds it. That's an excise tax on ammunition and firearms. So again, going back to what we mentioned earlier, if a firearm or style of firearm is banned, do you understand the financial impact that would have on conservation nationwide? It's a good argument to bring up when people are like, we need to ban this. Okay. Do you like nature? Yeah. Because without that, I believe I was working out the math, and somebody's going to slam me on this one. I know it's in the millions of dollars a year. If we cannot sell AR-15s, look at how many are sold per year. You put that 11% excise tax on that on an average price of, maybe it's $800-900. We're talking about millions of dollars that get taken away from conservation if we ban any type of firearm or that type of modern sporting rifle, which is basically the top dog. It is. That's the most popular sporting firearm there is. Get rid of that. Get rid of conservation. And again, we do this every single day. We do this just about 30, 45 minutes. We get together at 11 o'clock. We're going to be talking about the top trending news stories in the outdoors. We're going to talk about some cool tips and tricks, some cool things. Camping season's coming up. We're going to talk a lot about camp cooking, and we'll recap some fun stories and have some great interviews for you here on the Go Show. So I appreciate you hanging out with us every day at 11 o'clock, wherever it is. If you're on YouTube, on Facebook, please go ahead and share it out. If you're on Twitter, go ahead and retweet. We're still calling it that, X or re-X. I'll get it someday. Just keep sending it out and let your pals know. Hey, these guys talk about the outdoors on during the week when no one else is talking about the outdoors during the week. It's usually reserved for weekend programming on both television and on radio. So here we are streaming about the outdoors every day at 11 o'clock. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. We'll see you tomorrow at 11. We'll see you there.